Good evening, folks. This is part 2 of my response to That Ain't Science by YouTuber some guy named JD. If you haven't followed the last one, I'll link it down below. Please go watch it first to kind of be able to keep up. But right now, this is going to kind of follow up from this last bit where he talked about hydraulic sorting, and now he's going to explain about fossils.
Which explains why there's fossils in it in the first place, because fossils are really hard to form. In nature, when something dies, it is eaten up. The bones are scattered, if not eaten themselves. So to have it preserved is very rare. But to have all the fossils we have gives you more evidence for a global flood.
Wrong, sir. Wrong!
Now, it is true that most of the time when an animal is eaten, either parasites or scavengers or decomposition has occurred, and most fossils will not be produced unless it is in a very specific environment. However, there are a number of environments that allow for fossils to form. First, let's say, for example, we have marine life inside the water and it dies. And now if it's a deep enough lake or an ocean or a sea bottom, basically it gets to a point in which there's just no oxygen, no dissolved oxygen. So at this point, no animals can really live there. So there's no scavengers and no little buggers that are going to eat this. So a lot of times we're going to find a lot of fossils at the bottom of the ocean. So for this example, a flood is not required. We also find fossils in river valleys and floodplains. Once again, no major worldwide flood is required. On top of all that, volcanic ash and mud and earthquakes, all of those things can create environments for fossils to be formed. So once again, and I'm tired of saying it, a global flood is not required for fossils.
But to say these are thousands of years old or millions of years old is pure speculation and imagination, even when you get into the dating methods. Because to claim a dating method works is ridiculous. You can come up with a hypothesis that this dating method would work, but you can't really observe it and test it, retest it, and observe to see that it actually works.
I'm really not sure what makes him assume that the radiometric dating is not repeatable and testable, observable, or anything like that. Because in radiometric dating, scientists take a sample using very fancy machinery, determine how many radioactive isotopes are in the sample, then they basically watch the radioactive isotopes become more stable over time, and after many testable, observable, and repeatable experiments, they've determined the rate of decay to the more stable isotopes is constant. So now that they know that the rate of decay is constant, they can determine the half-life of the sample and thus are able to use lots of fancy math to determine the age of the sample itself.
Because to say something can date something that is 30,000 years old, you would first have to wait the 30,000 years to really know for sure that a certain object is that old, and then test it to see if your method works correctly.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong.
And this is where testing and double-blind testing really kick in to help verify radiometric dating. So one thing that they could do, as with the radiometric dating, is take something from an archaeological dig. So let's say that they've done these in Egypt, and they've actually done this in Egypt. They've looked at an archaeological dig. They've found certain artifacts. And they did a lot of historical research, and a lot of Egyptologists, they'll confirm and try and research what the date of the object is. And they take a sample of, the rock or whatever they use, and they shift it off to another lab, completely independent lab. A double-blind test is being done here. And so the Egyptologists, they do their research, they do the learning and the smartness, and they determine that this archaeological, object is 2,300 years old. Okay, great, 2,300 years old. Then The other lab has no idea what's happening over here. They're just told to take a sample, and they do the radiometric dating, and look, hey, this thing says it's 2,300 years old. So they send the lab back to the scientists, and voila. 2 independent labs research it, and they come across the same date. This is the kind of things that scientists use to help determine that radiometric dating is accurate. And not only that, they can also use tree rings and ice rings. And now, of course, creationists try so hard to debunk that, but I'm not even really going to go there. But even if the tree rings and the ice rings and all that didn't matter, what I just described before is pretty much kind of irrefutable.
Because a lot of these dating methods have been used on objects of known age, and they've come up wrong.
He's correct. There are many times, whether it be an isochron dating, radiometric dating, any of the other potassium, argon, rubidium, strontium, all those kind of datings, there were certain times in certain situations in which it was wrong. The dating was wrong. But that's to be expected. The scientists are aware of that. They've done research papers telling scientists, hey, these are the times in which this doesn't work. But just because sometimes this method doesn't work doesn't mean that it's absolutely useless. I mean, if you put on a watch and you go underwater and the watch stops working and stops telling time, does that mean watches don't work? Or what if you send the watch off into space where it's traveling at the speed of light, and so it experiences there's a difference in time, and so now your the watch is completely off from the time that it was down on here on Earth. Does that mean watches don't work anymore? No, it just means in these situations it doesn't work anymore. And so you have to use different methods, which scientists do.
That seems logical, other than you don't know the effects of the sun, the weather, and anything else that may have happened to that object over a decade, half a century, 1,000 years, or in some cases millions of years of unknown effects going on the Earth.
Did he just admit to millions of years? Also, scientists, if they're already under this assumption that the samples are millions of years old, so what they're going to do, and what they do, they run a battery of tests to simulate any possible kind of thing that could affect the decay rates of these samples. So they'll put a lot of sun, a lot of heat, a lot of cold. They'll throw all kinds of chemicals on it. They'll throw electromagnetic waves. They'll do anything that they can think of to try and make the decay rate change. And what they have found is that in the overwhelming majority of times that the decay rate has been consistent and the radiometric dating has been consistent. And if there has been any change in the decay rate, it has been very minuscule. And definitely not to the point of where they can confuse 6,000 years for billions.
But we believe it, and we believe it for 2 main reasons. We see the hypocrisy in Christianity. We see the ridiculousness as portrayed. We don't see the true Christianity. So we want no part of it. I remember being like that.
What gets me about this statement is how he's like, yeah, well, see, I used to be that way. But now he's a fundy creationist. So what was he before? Because generally, when we talk about Christians that are generally hypocritical, we're really mostly referring to the fundies. Because generally the more liberal Christians, they're not really that hypocritical. We're generally very critical of the fundamentalists. So I don't know what he was before, and I don't know what it is that made him jump to fundamentalism, but man, you went the wrong route.
And the other part is...
I know where this is going.
We want to do whatever we want to do. We like our sin.
Anybody gonna pick up that phone? Because I fucking called it!
We don't like being told what to do. We don't see the harm in the things we choose to do.
You know, what really gets me about this is, when creationists try to talk with evolutionists and try to tell them it's their sin, blah, 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 blah. But what about the Christian scientists? So they have people that are Christians, that are scientists, that don't believe you. But yet, they just kind of, I don't know if they just ignore that, and then some of them will say that, like, oh, well, they're not, like, true Christians, or they're just being misled, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's just, why do people not just maybe, people that believe in God, and believe in the salvation, and believe in, and that Jesus, is the, Son of God, and that he's, have faith in him, and you could be saved, blah, 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 all that good, and they believe the gospel just like you, they just don't think that the earth is 6,000 years old, and they accept that the Bible is fallible and that it was written by fallible man. Why is that so hard to grasp?
But that's pretty much what I get when I talk about these things, is people don't want to accept the truth.
No, they just aren't accepting of what you're peddling as truth. They want something that can be substantiated and something that they can be justified in believing in. They want something that takes into account all of the empirical data that we've gathered, and not something that relies on ambiguity and ignoring all of that empirical data and using post hoc rationalizations to try to do so. They want something that makes predictions and not something that can't make predictions and tries to dismiss science as unscientific, meanwhile calling itself scientific while doing whatever they can to not be a part of the scientific method or peer review.
Yep, that's what I got from my notes here for this video. Next video I'll get into another subject that science is used to hide behind.
And I can't wait to show you and everyone else why it is that you don't know what the hell you're talking about. This is the Atheist Chef signing off. Peace. But right now, this is going to kind of follow up from this last bit where he talked about hydraulic sorting, and now he's going to explain about fossils.
Which explains why there's fossils in it in the first place, because fossils are really hard to form in nature or a global flood.
Wrong, sir. Wrong.
Now, it is true that most of the time when an animal is eaten, either parasites or scavengers or decomposition has occurred, and most fossils will not be produced unless it is in a very specific environment. However, there are a number of environments that allow for fossils to form. First, let's say, for example, we have marine life inside the water. Good evening, folks. This is part 2 of my response to That Ain't Science by YouTuber some guy named JD. If you haven't followed the last one, I'll link it down below. Please go watch it first to kind of be able to keep.
When something dies, it is eaten up. The bones are scattered, if not eaten themselves. So to have it preserved is very rare. But to have all the fossils we have gives you more evidence